So, as he said, my name is David. My wife down here is Amy. We have two sons, Ben and Daniel, and together we are Julian Family Ministries, and we are missionaries to Papua New Guinea. I'm actually from, about 20 minutes north of here, so I grew up in Stratford School District. My parents live south of Stratford away, so we're like right dead center in the middle of Stratford and Rogersville. So growing up, we did not appreciate the Rogersville people. You know, you guys, it was kind of a one-sided, we were really bad at sports at Stratford at that time. They've gotten better since then, so you guys always just stomped us into the ground, but we didn't like you very much. But I like you now, so you guys are great people. Anyway, I don't know why I said that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't want to say I'm bitter, but maybe a little bit. So anyway, do you want to come up and tell your story real quick? Okay, yeah, sorry. So yeah, we are missionaries to Papua New Guinea. Our two sons aren't here, Ben and Daniel. I apologize for them not being here. Ben and Daniel, they're both kind of getting to those teenage years, and there was a fair bit of isolation for them in Papua New Guinea, so we thought it was important for them to spend time at their home church while we're back in the States. So they're back with their grandparents going to our home church. But they would love to be here, but we want to make sure they get plugged in. So sorry for that. And then also, I want to say a big appreciation to your sound and media people. I ran sound and media at our old church for, like 20 years, and one of the things I hated the most was when people would send you last minute slide presentations, and I completely forgot about it till last night. And I said, if they didn't get it done, no problem. If they don't have it, no worries. But they apparently have it done. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you. Anyway, I'll start talking about Papua New Guinea now. So it's kind of hard to talk about Papua New Guinea. Before you go out, you think you know about the place. You go on the internet, you do a bunch of research. Like, this is what the statistics are. This is what the people are like, and then you go there and you realize, hey, it's not at all like that. You think you know, but you don't. So you learn new things, and it's easy in a setting like Papua New Guinea to solely focus on the bad things, but here's the reality of Papua New Guinea. A lot of bad things happen, but many of the people there, they're also some of the most kind and loving people I have ever met in my entire life. There's pastors there who have devoted their life to the church, and they have sacrificed beyond anything I can ever imagine for the gospel. We have friends there. We have people that we consider family there. We love being back to where our home church is and where, our family is, but we miss our family there too. And so, again, our point in being here is to kind of present the need in Papua New Guinea, so you'll probably hear a little bit towards the negative slant of the things in Papua New Guinea, but there are a lot of great people there that we love. And so just to put that caveat out there before we start. So Papua New Guinea is known as the land of the unexpected. So PNG is known by many as the land of the unexpected, and indeed it's an apt name for the country. It's a land of great diversity. So PNG actually has 850 different languages and 1,000 different people groups. Makes it the most ethnically and linguistically diverse place in the world. And you might be wondering, if you look at the landmass of all of Papua New Guinea, you push it all together and it's about the size of California. How is it possible to have 850 different languages in a place that size? And the reality is simply geography. So we have, that was the pastor. So these are some of my pastor friends. I always like to point them out. These are some of my favorite people in the world. We love working with them. So the land of the unexpected, we live in basically a giant tropical rainforest. So there's 850 languages, 1,000 different people groups. It's a land of great diversity. And, sorry, I lost my place here a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, so the size of California. So part of it is just geography. So we have 650 different islands, and 160 of those are inhabited. So 160 of those languages are just different islands, but the majority of them are actually on the main island of Papua New Guinea. And so they are very remote places. It's a very mountainous country, so we have a big mountain range that runs through the middle of the country, some of them up as tall as 14,000 feet. We have huge rivers and streams, and people just are separated by geography. If you're living on the other side of a mountain range, it could be 2 miles away, but you're never going to see the people next door. There's not a lot of roads and infrastructure there, so People have just lived in relative isolation for years and years because you can't get to these places. Even now, these are like modern pictures, so a lot of what we end up doing, we end up having to go in boats to get there. We'll have to cross, like this is a river here, and you can't, I should have put the one where you could see the cars going across. There's a highway that goes right through that river right there. There's no bridge, but and then you can see some of the roads. The majority of the roads are just very rough, rural dirt roads. And so with that, we want to say thank you to Speed the Light. I think there might be a picture of the Land Cruiser they were able to help us get. So Speed the Light, for those you don't know, the youth of the Assemblies of God, they raise funds for missionaries to have various things, but for what it helped us with was to get a vehicle. And so there's a lot of places in Papua New Guinea you just simply can't go without a Land Cruiser. That's the rig to have there. People in the U.S. think Land Cruiser, they think of like the fancy modern one. That's not what we got. we got vinyl bench seats, and just everything's old mechanical style. Gets like really bad gas mileage, but it will get you anywhere you want to go and get you out, and it will not break down. And so that's what we needed. And so just a shout out to Speed the Light. Thank you for that. We would have never been able to get that if they had not helped us with that. So thank you to Speed the Light. Anyhow, so that the remote isolation, the different places, it leads to a lot of different people groups, a lot of different places, a lot of different cultures, all living in the same relatively small island. It also makes it exceptionally difficult to assess things in the country. So there have been several attempts over the years to do a census to find out how many people are in PNG, but the reality is because of the isolation and government inefficiency, we don't really know how many people are there. Somewhere between 9 and 16 million people. I know it's kind of a substantial question mark area there. I think it's probably somewhere in the high middle of that, but we don't know. And so this lack of information makes it difficult to make any true assessment of an area without going there. So a lot of what we actually did during this first term was we were going to places and finding out what the needs were. What we want to be efficient in the resources that God has provided for us as missionaries, right? We don't want to just double up on things and go places where things aren't needed. And so a lot of what we did in this last term was go to various places in Papua New Guinea and find out where the needs were. And what we found out was truly it was the land of the unexpected and a lot of contradictions, honestly. So officially, Papua New Guinea is a Christian nation. If you follow the Joshua Project, you would see that the country as a whole is listed as 94% Christian. Even so much so that in March of 25, the parliament voted to officially make Papua New Guinea a Christian nation, putting references to God in the preamble of the Constitution. The Bible is now recognized as an official symbol in Papua New Guinea. Yet when you look at the news and the other realities of the countries, you see a different picture, right? PNG is also one of the most violent countries in the world. Depending on what statistics you look at, we're as high as number 2. Tribal violence between tribes is rampant. Domestic violence is among the highest in the world. Violence against women and all the various things that go with that were extremely high. Carjackings, gang violence, human trafficking, just about every kind of violent crime you can think of were pretty high on the list. How can that be in a country that's supposed to be 94% Christian? Well, here's the reality. I don't have all the answers, but after spending 3 years there and going all over the country, here's my 2 cents. PNG suffers from a drastic lack of discipleship and knowing what it truly means to be a Christian. So the reality is the vast majority of the people, they have heard the gospel in some form or fashion, at least a partial representation of it. And most of them would absolutely say they are Christians, but they were never truly discipled to understand what it meant to be a Christian. Many have a basic understanding of Jesus and who he is, but instead of truly understanding the gospel and turning to the one true God, they've simply mixed Christianity in with animistic beliefs and cultural religions. So if you think about it, so just a very succinct, animism's complex, and it would take days to explain what truly animism is. But animism, in essence, is they believe in spirits are everywhere and affect everything in our lives, right? Nothing happens naturally. It's always because of spirits. So, if someone dies of natural death at 100 years old, it wasn't because they were 100 years old and their body was failing. It's because a spirit came and did something to their body, or, 3 people in a row trip over that rock over there. Well, that rock must have a spirit in it. And I mean, it's an oversimplification of it, but that's just the basics. So they believe that a lot of places in the world, we're trying to convince people that the spiritual world exists. That's not the way in Papua New Guinea. They absolutely believe the spiritual world exists. They not only believe in spirits, they believe in hundreds of spirits. So you go and you talk to a group of these people, and we don't, you give the basic gospel presentation, right? And that's what's been done to a lot of people. They give the basic gospel presentation. They hear stories about Jesus and God and what he's done in the Bible, and he does all these mighty things. And to people who believe in hundreds of spirits, it's like, yeah, that's a powerful spirit. We definitely want that. We want to be Christians. We want to follow that spirit because he's the most powerful one. And so instead of having a true understanding of what Christianity is, that it's the one true God, that Jesus is the only way to God, they've just added them in as he's the most powerful one, right? He's the most powerful spirit, so we're going to say we're Christians. Even in places where it seems like true changes happen, when the cards are on the table and the true colors is shown, it's often not what we expect. So one example of this is the village where we stayed when we first moved to Papua New Guinea, right? All this happened actually shortly after we had left the village. So what happens when you're a missionary? The first year, roughly, or little more than a year, you're trying to learn the language and the culture, and especially a place like Papua New Guinea, you're trying to learn enough of the culture that you can keep yourself out of trouble, essentially. You go to the wrong place, say the wrong thing, and you can get in trouble pretty fast. And so we went to what was, a relatively safe village. There was Assemblies of God church there. There was a Catholic church down the road a little bit. If you had asked people in this village, were they Christians, I don't know that you could say 100% would say yes, but almost 100% of them would have said yes. They believed in God. They believed that they were Christians, either Catholic or Assemblies of God in that village. But when something happened to the village, something happens, you get poked a little bit, you see what comes out, right? And so what happened, 2 people of some affluence, or, they died in the community. So one of them actually had cancer. He'd been sick, and actually, most people can't do this, but he had money, and so he went to the capital for cancer treatment. He was gone for years. We never even met him. The entire year we were there, he was gone for cancer treatment, so he had cancer. The other one, I'm not sure why they died. The reality is, unfortunately, with the medical system in Papua New Guinea, sometimes people just die, and we don't know why. But anyway, 2 people of influence in the community died, right, and fairly close together. So animism, things don't happen from natural causes, right? And so what will typically happen in what we thought was unsafe communities, we thought this wouldn't happen in our community, but what happens in the traditional setting is they'll call someone called the glass man, and this is a picture of a glass man, not the one that came, I don't know, it could have been him, I guess, I don't know. Anyway, glass man, or like a seer, or essentially a witch doctor is what we're talking about. It's the closest we can come to like an American mindset of it. And so what they'll do, they'll bring him in, and he's going to discern what happened to these people, because it's a spirit, right? It didn't happen naturally. It happened because of a spirit. And so what's going to typically happen? He's going to come into the village. He's going to point out a handful of young single women, because in that society, women in general have a very low status, and especially women that aren't married, don't have kids. They have very little value in that society. And so when things happen to them, there's really no repercussions, right? And so what happens is he's going to come in, he's going to point out a couple single women, and typically what will happen is the village will kill them. And so that's what was going to happen. In this village where we lived, where there was Assemblies of God Church, 50 yards from where this was happening, they dragged these women out, and they start attacking them, and they're going to kill them. Now, fortunately, in our situation, the Assemblies of God pastor was able to step in. He had enough clout or whatever in the community that they allowed him to take them away. He got them in his truck. He was able to take them up and away. But even to this day, in this Christian community, these people are not allowed to return to their home. And this isn't like, it's more so impactful than an American mindset, because these are tribal people. This is her family group, right? This isn't just a random community that they live in. This is her family. That's all they've ever known, is living in this place. And so those people can never return to their family. They can never return back to where they are, to this Christian nation, to this Christian village, because they'll kill them if they come back. It's a hard story even to think about, because like I said, these were people we knew. Like, we love these people. We would consider these people friends. And you know, we went to church with a lot of these people in that same church. And just on the surface, we would have assumed that they knew Christ, that they had a true relationship with Christ. But once you find out what's happening, that animism, it's just below the surface. And not in everyone. Like I said, there are certainly people that are changed. The pastor there, you know, he was from that area. He didn't believe in that anymore. Again, it's like a mob mindset, right? Probably a lot of the people there did not believe that was the right thing to do, but they're not going to stop them either. And so it's hard to think about, but and so it's all due to a lack of discipleship, right? They understand that Jesus is real, that God is real. They don't understand that it's not just a God, it's the one true God. That there's not more than one way, that Jesus is the only way, right? And so that's why we're there. That's why we still need missionaries in a place like Papua New Guinea, where they would say 94% of them are Christian. I do want to talk just a little bit, just a little bit of a snippet of the gospel. So our leadership through prayer and fasting, we've identified 5 areas that we need to work on. And so this is throughout the entire Pacific, because the majority of the Pacific, at least the Melanesian countries, we kind of run into a lot of the same problems. They all were animistic cultures to begin with. Some of them are further along than others. But these are needs that we see all throughout the Pacific. But obviously our focus is Papua New Guinea, so we're looking for people for Papua New Guinea. and throughout the other Pacific. And before I start again, I do want to give the caveat, because like I said, we talk about these things, we're always talking about like the worst, the bad things, but there is already a tremendous work going on through the Assemblies of God Church in Papua New Guinea, through Assemblies of God missionaries that were there, and national church pastors and leadership that were there. There's already a huge work that's going on and spreading. And it's our goal as missionaries not to come in and like completely take over this situation. We don't want to come in and take over the work that's being done there. It's our goal to come in and be like force multipliers to the work that's going on there, to help them, to assist them, to come alongside them in some of these areas. And so like I said, there's pastors there. You sit down. It's weird because you go into these countries and like because you're a missionary, you kind of like automatically get this status as like leadership level, and you have pastors that are like, you know, they've been pastoring for 40 years in their context in this village, and then they come over and they're like, well, what do I do with this? I'm like, I don't know. I should be asking you what I do in this place. But the people that are there, they've sacrificed stuff just beyond anything I can imagine. I talked to one pastor, and he was a church planner in Papua New Guinea, and he was a national pastor. He had 7 kids, and he had buried 4 kids at 4 different church plant locations they've been at. These people have sacrificed things, and I don't want to make it seem like all that's happening is just the missionaries. These people are already doing a tremendous work that's there. But these are areas that the national church in Papua New Guinea and us as missionaries, we see as shortcomings, and so we're looking for people to come alongside us and to work with us in Papua New Guinea to work at these areas. So our number 1 is Bible schools. Primarily Bible school teachers. And so right now, Papua New Guinea has 5 Bible schools. That when I say Bible school, you're not going to, like, this is the entirety of one of the Bible schools. That's every student, every teacher, plus me and a couple other missionaries jammed in there. So it's not like a huge Bible school like what you would think of in America, right? But we have 5 of these Bible schools, 4 regional and 1 national. And currently we have a major shortage of people that can actually teach at a Bible school level. It's important that we have people who have enough theological training that they can actually teach the gospel well in that context, right? Because it's very easy with animism to get things mixed together. And so right now, Australian missionaries who were there before. They did a good job of training up a core group of people that were the Bible school teachers. And unfortunately, Melanesian mindset in general, there's not necessarily a lot of thought given to future planning. And so what's happening at this point is we've got to the point where a lot of these teachers have either died off or they are sick to the point where they can no longer continue to teach. And so we have 5 Bible schools. Even in the year before we left, one of them had to close for a year because they didn't have enough teachers. Another one had to close for a term because their principal had a heart attack and they didn't have anyone else to take over the teaching duties. And so what we're looking for is we're looking for people with some theological training. So, a lot of it, we're looking for some veteran pastors who could come in and do this work and work in Bible schools to, again, not take over the work. We want them to be there to train with these national pastors and take the work over because you can't, it's not like you say, hey, we need a Bible school teacher, and it's like, okay, there's one sitting right there. It might that be that way a little bit in the U.S., but it's not that way there. It takes years to really train someone to the point where they can take over that role. And so, we're looking for veteran pastors who can come in or people with theological training who can come in, teach at the Bible schools, and continue on the work there. The next thing is kids ministry and youth ministry. We just spoke it together into Next Gen Children's Ministry. The unfortunate reality is in almost the entire South Pacific, children's ministry and youth ministry has not been given a high priority. I don't have time to explain why that's important. You guys, I think, know why kids ministry is important. That's the next generation, right? We are losing a generation in Papua New Guinea right now where everything is a complex situation, right? So a lot of the families, it's just like here. A lot of the families, they want their children to grow up and get out of the village setting. They see the city and university and these things as ways for them to get out of the village setting. So a lot of them are sending their kids off. They go to university, and then they're just gone. They're out of the church completely. They'll either get a job in Australia or they'll do something else, but they lose every bit that the church hasn't taken the time to disciple that younger generation. So we're looking for people with Next Gen ministry, children's ministry, youth ministry experience to, again, come alongside the national church. There's workers there that are willing to do the work, but we have to have people who can go and train them. And so we're looking for missionaries to do that. The next one is evangelism and church planning. Again, there's people there that are already doing this. We need people who are there to go alongside them, help continue to train them, make them better at what they're doing, and then also to resource them and help them work in these different areas. There are people in the Bible schools right now who are training, who are willing to go to the hard-to-reach places. And when I say hard-to-reach places, if you start looking at the statistics, Papua New Guinea has some of the most remote, unreached places left in the entire world. The road infrastructure there and a lot of the places just essentially non-existent, so you're walking days, if not up to a week, to get to some of these places. They are remote locations where the reality is most people don't necessarily want to do that. But we have Bible school students who are willing to do that if we will walk alongside them and help to train them up to do this work. And then the last is health and community development. It's not more important than the rest, but it's what we do, so I'm going to spend a little more time on it than the rest. All these are key areas for the church. So how can health and community development help to spread the gospel? We talked about the story before, right, where they were going to kill these women because of the spiritual world, the animistic belief. And so what can happen with it's all due to a lack of understanding of the world around them. They haven't been taught about bacteria, they haven't been taught about these other things. And so what we can do with just a basic training on, say, bacteria and water purification is we can begin to break down this worldview, right? So people are getting sick all the time, these kids are getting sick, and they're like, well, there's got to be a spirit in the water, there's got to be a spirit here. That's the only reason we could be getting sick. Well, if you can go in, you can explain to them what's really happening is that, they got a pig house, or, the pigs are 100 yards up the stream from where they're getting their drinking water out of, or their outhouse is right up there, or their neighbor's outhouse right up there, and that stuff all runs downstream, right? But if you look at it, it just looks like clear water, but there's bacteria in there. And if you, it's not that these people are not intelligent people. They're intelligent people, but if you've never been told, it looks like clear water. I mean, you just don't know the difference. And so when you can explain to them what's actually happening there, that there's bacteria in the water and that's why your kids are getting sick, or this person died because of this particular sickness or whatever, and you can even help with those situations, it begins to break down those animistic beliefs, right? It begins to break down the belief that the Spirit causes everything. They begin to understand what's actually causing things, and it helps to get them away from the animistic belief. Another thing it does, it just allows us to be there and spend time with them, right? The longer we're in ministry, the longer we're, in missions in general, the more we understand it's all about relationship. It's all about time spent with people, right? That doesn't matter if you're in Papua New Guinea or if you're in Rogersville, Missouri. Ministry is about relationship. It's about spending time with people. Our old church pastor used to say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And so that's what we do with community development and health teaching, right? You go and you spend time with them. You spend time with these people. Ideally, we're taking some Bible school students out with us so they can begin to build relationships, so they can eventually come back and start a church plant. And also there's a health teacher training school. We'd like to take some of them out more. Again, some of these things are in process where, things didn't go exactly like we planned. We're still in the process of doing some of these things, but that's what we're there. It's all about spending time with people, showing people you care about them, right? And when people know that you care about them, then they're going to want to know why, right? Why do you care about us? Why would you come halfway across the world just to come and teach us these things? Well, we do it because we care about you. And why do we care about you? We care about you because God cares about you, right? And it just begins to break down those walls that people have, right? It gives us a reason to be there. But those are our 5 areas. So Bible schools, kids ministry, youth ministry, evangelism and church planting, and health and community development. And so here's the long-term vision. The Assemblies of God of Papua New Guinea separates the country into 5 regions. And the long-term goal is to have 5 missionary teams, at least 1 working in each one of these areas in the 5 places. So that's a total of 25 missionary units. 5 Bible school missionaries, 5 children's ministry missionaries, 5 youth ministry missionaries, 5 church planting evangelism missionaries, and 5 community development and medical missionaries. We're back in the States to raise funds, yes, but we are also back in the States to find 25 missionary, either singles or families, who are willing to go with us back to Papua New Guinea. It's our goal to reach these remote places in Papua New Guinea for the gospel. And I know not everyone's going to be called to Papua New Guinea, but if you are, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to talk to you anyway, but, we'd really love to talk to you if you feel called to Papua New Guinea. And I know, listen, some people, we have, a code back there. You can just scan it to kind of start getting some information. Because we were there not that long ago. It seems like a while. It's been 10 years now. But when you first started into missions, or you first feel called to missions, it's like, well, where do you go from here? And so we just want to help you with that, It doesn't matter if you're called to Papua New Guinea or somewhere else. We just love to walk alongside the path with you, and I know it's, hard to do, so just come back and talk to us. We'd love to talk to you in the back, no matter what. Anyway, so yeah, but we're excited because God's got big plans for Papua New Guinea. Things haven't went exactly like they thought we were going to. There's certainly things that we would have liked to accomplish by now that haven't happened yet. But he's got big plans, and we see big things coming for the future. Did you want to come up and tell your story? I'll have my wife come up and tell a quick story, and then I will go into a short message for the rest.
So I don't always do this, but I felt like I was supposed to tell my little testimony from Papua New Guinea. So like David was saying, things don't always go like we think they're going to. We had a lot of issues and injuries. I personally had a lot of injuries in Papua New Guinea. The terrain is crazy, and things are just a little wild there, and healthcare is pretty much non-existent. Anyhow, my family had come to visit. My mom and my sister came to visit, and on the day that we were supposed to fly out to the capital to let them go home, there had been a torrential downpour, and there was a flood that came up. So the flooding washed out the bridge to get to the airport. So we're sitting there, we're like, oh goodness, what are we going to do? But we heard that they had built up enough sediment or whatever in the river to make a crossing where you could get across either on foot or with a land cruiser. So we were like, all right, we're missionaries. We're going to do this. We're going to go across on foot with our bags on our shoulders, and we're going to do this, right? So we got there, and they said, oh, it's okay. We'll take you across in a land cruiser. We're like, okay. So in the process of moving our bags from one truck to another truck, we're just walking along, and I tripped. There was a piece of rebar sticking up through the mud that I didn't see, and I fell, and I'm laying on the ground, and I was like, well, that was stupid. Like, all these people can see me, and I turned over, and my knee had split completely open. You could see my bone, you could see the ligaments and the tendons and all that stuff. And I'm a nurse practitioner. Okay, so I'm laying there in shock, and I was like, wow, so that's what your patellar tendon looks like. That's interesting, right? And so I grabbed some water, and I'm pouring out, I'm trying to get the dirt out of it and stuff. Meanwhile, all these people surround us. And if you've never been there, you don't really 100% understand. In America, if somebody gets hurt and people are surrounding you, they're typically coming to surround you to help you. There, it's kind of a you never know. Are they coming to help me? Are they coming to rob me? Are they coming? You just don't know, okay? So I'm laying there. I'm trying to figure out, how is my mom going to get to the airport? Or I don't want my kids to see my bones. My husband's trying to figure out what we're doing. I need to clean out my leg. And it was just overwhelming. And also thinking, oh man, I have to go to the hospital here. And I really don't want to, because it's going to be disgusting. And so I just started praying, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. And that's all I could say was, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. And sometimes as a missionary, people think that we're all these heroic and super amazing people or whatever. We're just people. And sometimes we feel abandoned sometimes too. We're really isolated where we live. And sometimes you don't think that God sees you, even though you know. But I laid there on the ground in the mud with my leg all open, and I was like, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. And I just said it over and over and over. And all of a sudden, I heard somebody say my name. And I was like, who in this great crowd of people knows my name? And I turned over my shoulder, and one of those Bible school students who we had spent a lot of time with was right there at my shoulder. And he said, Amy, are you okay? And I said, oh, Jesus, you sent me. Emmanuel is his name. And his name is Emmanuel, God with us. I was like, of all the people that you could have sent, you sent this one to remind me that you were with me. And he stayed the whole time. And he said, I wasn't even supposed to be here. I just felt like I should go down to the bridge. And then I saw David standing there. I said, what is the missionary doing there? And then I saw you. I said, Emmanuel, God sent you to me because he needed to remind me that he was with me. So that's my testimony. And everything's good. I just have a really gnarly scar and had to go to Australia and all this stuff, but it's all good. But that was my testimony. Sorry, I made him cry.
It's all good. He's a God who sees us, right? And we do covet your prayers. I didn't say that. I should always say that in churches, but, you come in and the most important thing you can do is pray for us. I can give examples where I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt the prayer of God's people. It changed things for where we were at that time in that place. So, please take a prayer card at the back too. Pray for us. It's, like I said, we're here to raise funds too, but honestly, prayer is the most important thing you can do for us. It's a big deal. He's a God who sees us, though. It's exciting. But God's got big plans for Papua New Guinea, right? And we're excited to see it. Again, things haven't gone exactly like we thought they were going to in a few instances. With Amy's knee, we ended up having to get evacuated to Australia for a little while because it got infected after they didn't clean it at the hospital and all these other things. Anyway, but he's been with us, right, the whole time. He was the God God who sees us. He's with us. He's got big plans. It sure would be nice, though, to see what some of those plans are up front, wouldn't it? Yeah. As we, I remember sitting there in a hotel room in Australia with Amy's in the hospital, getting all these antibiotics. I'm like, what in the world are we doing here? We're halfway across the world. Why are we here? What were we thinking? And even as we began to transition out of P&G, I started thinking a lot about, where we had been, where we were then, and where we're going, right? And because, if I'm being honest, sometimes things are, they're hard. They can get exceptionally hard as a missionary sometimes. And it can seem like what I want to accomplish isn't getting accomplished. It's one of those things, these things happen, Amy gets hurt or whatever, and bad things happen. If it's easy to take if you think, if you see a lot of great things happening, but sometimes it doesn't seem like a lot of great things are happening, just all bad things are happening, right? And so as I've been thinking about that, and as I've been reading my Bible, so that's what, what you should do, right? You start feeling these feelings, you start having problems, where do you go? You go to God, right? You go to the Bible, He's got answers for you. I don't have answers for you. God's got answers. And so pretty regularly the last few months and years, it's come to my mind as I read the things in the Bible. So much of what we see in the Bible, we only get small glimpses of what's actually happening, right? It's like any history book. You're not getting the entire history of whatever story. You're getting the high points, you're getting the low points, you're seeing just little spots. It's the same way in the Bible, right? We're reading what in just a few chapters, what can often be an entire lifetime or decades or even centuries in just a handful of chapters, right? There's a lot of examples of this. One of them is Joseph in the Bible, right? So he gets more life description than just about anyone. His story starts in Genesis chapter 37, finishes with chapter 50. So that's only 13 chapters for his entire life. And there's a lot of other stories mixed in there as well. So you can sit down in an afternoon and read the entire story of Joseph. Yet it's the same with all the stories in the Bible. We get just a glimpse. Joseph lived 110 years. We can sit down, we can read his entire life story in an afternoon. Abraham's a lot the same way. His story starts Genesis chapter 12, finishes in chapter 25. Again, 13 chapters, but his life was 175 years long. Why does this matter? Well, let's look at a few stories from Abraham and Joseph this morning, and I'll show you the point of what I'm trying to get to. So we'll start with the story of Abraham. Let's look at Genesis chapter 12. It'll start in 12 verses 1 through 5. And so this in the Bible, it's our introduction to Abraham, right? Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 5. So starting in chapter 12, verses 1. And the Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your land, your relatives, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt, and all the people on the earth will be a blessing through you." So Abraham went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Okay, so this, again, it's our introduction to Abraham in the Bible, right? God promises to make him into a great nation. But when we're first introduced to Abraham in the Bible, he's already 75 years old. He's no spring chicken. He's already lived the length of a pretty long life. At this point, he has no kids. He's already well past the childbearing years of today, right? Now, again, they lived longer at that time, so I'm not sure when the childbearing years exactly ended. But by today's standards, he's well past childbearing years. And I'm not going to tell the whole, and God promises to make him into a great nation. Now, I'm not going to tell the entire story of Abraham because I know it's a good Bible-believing church. If you don't know the story, again, it's only 13 chapters. Go read it. You read it in a couple hours. So, anyway, Abraham, along the way, he makes plenty of mistakes, but he follows God's command, right? Verse 1, God says to go. Verse 4, it says Abraham went, as the Lord had told him. So Abraham trusted the Lord and did what he said. Let's skip ahead a little to chapter 15. Now, this is God's covenant to Abraham. Again, he had made the covenant originally. This is his confirmation of the covenant to Abraham. In chapter 15, Abraham has followed what God has asked him to do, and it seemed like nothing happened, right? We don't know exactly how much time has passed between then and now, but we know from what happened in the chapters that some time has passed. Most scholars say between 5 to 10 years. We don't know exactly how long. But in chapter 15, Abraham was a little aggravated at God. And so here's how God responded to him. Chapter 15, verse 5. Okay, it says, so God says, look at the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them. Your offspring will be that numerous. All right? So God doubles down. I didn't read part of that, sorry. Oh, okay, yeah. So God says, look at the stars in the sky and count. Look at the sky and count the stars, if you're able to count them. Your offspring will be that numerous. So God doubles down on his promise. It says in verse 6, Abraham believed him, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So, again, we don't have the exact number on when this happened. Most scholars believe between 5 to 10 years have passed before God gives him this confirmation. So time has passed. A lot of time has passed, actually. Again, we read it in only 3 chapters, but somewhere between 5 and 10 years has passed. But God confirmed what he said, and Abraham believed him. We jump ahead again to the story in the story of Abraham to Hagar in Genesis chapter 16. So what happens? Abraham and Sarai, they get tired of waiting for God to do what he said he would do, so they take matters into their own hands, right? Sarai gives her servant Hagar to Abraham to have a child. Now, I don't have time to go into all the reasons why that's wrong. It's not really part of the story. The point of this is they didn't wait, right? God had told them something would happen. If God tells you something is going to happen, you can take that to the bank. It's going to happen. Just a lot of times not in the time frame that we want it to happen in, right? And so, and I have to admit on this, these are some times where I start to understand what they were thinking when you have to look at the time frame. And again, like I said, I'm not saying it was right. Obviously, it was not right. It was a bad thing to do. But they had waited 11 years at this point, right? I'm not trying to justify that what they did. All I'm saying is I understand it because they had waited 11 years. How many things in my life have I waited a lot less than 11 years and then tried to push something through in my own strength when I knew that God still had a plan for it, right? We have to be patient. We have to get used to this waiting. Waiting isn't easy sometimes, right? Obviously, it wasn't the right thing to do. But again, the older I get, I used to read these Bible stories, and I used to think, man, how could these people be so stupid? You know, what are they? Some of the things they do, it's like, what in the world? And, you know, the older I get, the more stupid things I do. And then I'm like, you know, obviously, I haven't done anything like that, but I've done plenty of stupid stuff on my own, right? And so I'm not saying it was the right thing to do. I'm saying that the older I get, the more stupid things I do, the more I can relate to some of these people in the Bible, right? Let's jump ahead again to Genesis chapter 18, so this is the last time that God tells them what will happen, right? God appears to Abraham through 3 men. At the end of the conversation, the men tell Abraham that in a year they'll come back and he will have a son. So God makes a commitment to him again, and what happens? Sarah laughs. And I've heard more than one person give a sermon about how Sarah didn't have faith and you know, all these bad things about Sarah, and I'm like, you know, I get it. Again, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm just saying I get it. At this point, it had been 24 years since the initial commitment was made and nothing. She was 89 years old, and the Bible tells us well beyond childbearing years. So I don't know before if she was. Again, we don't know how biology worked back then, but I know at this point the Bible says she is well beyond childbearing years. And we haven't read through the entire story, obviously, but a lot of life has happened since the original commitment was made. 24 years have passed. They didn't even have the same names, right? God changed their name to Abraham and Sarah instead of Abram and Sarai. And like I said, I understand the doubt. Yet we see in chapter 21, verse 1 through 7, the rest of the story. So Genesis chapter 21, verse 1, and we'll go through verse 7. Says, the Lord came to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Let me read that little section again. The Lord came to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. He always will. He's faithful, right? Verse 2, it says, Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the appointed time God had told him. Abraham named his son who was born to him, the one Sarah bore to him, Isaac. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has made me laugh, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. She also said, who would have told Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne a son for him in his old age. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. So Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. 25 years had passed from the time the promise was given to the time it came to pass. 25 years. But God had a plan the entire time, right? He knew what he was doing, even though Sarah and Abraham's faith may have waned. God still knew what he was doing. Which leads me to the main focus today, which is God's ways are better than our ways. His thoughts are bigger than our thoughts. I know that's like a grand, like, you guys didn't realize that, right? You never heard that before. I get to the point now where I'm like, I always used to try and prepare things, and I always want to, keep it fresh, but here's the reality. God's never changed, so what we talk about, it won't change that much either, right? His ways are better than our ways. His thoughts are bigger and better than our thoughts. So you and I read the story of Abraham in just a few hours, but it was 25 years from the time that Abraham even began to see God's covenant come to fruition. And even then, he never truly saw the fruits of the covenant that God made with him, right? So Abraham was 100 years old before Isaac was born. He was 175 years when he died. God had told Abraham that he would make his descendants as many as the stars in the sky. Well, that didn't happen in 75 years. When Abraham died, he had still not actually seen God's covenant fully come to fruition. But God is God, right? And he made that commitment. And so even to this day, the word that he gave to Abraham, the commitment that he gave to Abraham is continuing to fulfill itself to this day, right? His descendants are still out there. You see, God doesn't see things the way that we see them. We have just a glimpse of a short period of time in the grand scheme of things. We look and we see the effects around us. We see the world around us in the here and now, and that's all we see. But God isn't like that. He sees everything. He sees everything that's happened in the past. He sees everything that's happening now. He sees everything that's going to happen in the future. Then you multiply that by all the people that are living now, all the people that ever have lived, all the people that will live, and you end up with this gigantic tapestry that he's weaving together into a perfect work of art. He knows every little piece and where it's supposed to go and why it's supposed to go there. I look at church building, for example. So before we were in missions, I was in a metal fabrication shop. We built things. I'm a builder. I like construction, that kind of thing. That's what I understand. And so you take this church building for an example, and all you see is a little bit of drywall. You see some sockets and stuff, outlets and stuff like that. But there's so much more. There's tens of thousands of little pieces, nails and these things placed here. Wires are a certain size. Beams are a certain size so the building doesn't collapse on our head. But we don't see any of that, right? All we see is what's right in front of us. We see the surface of things. But there was an engineer, there was a designer at some point who put those plans on paper, and he said, we need this size wire so that the building doesn't burn down. We need this size truss so that the roof doesn't collapse. God is the designer. He's building things into this gigantic tapestry. It's like we look at a picture. It's like we're seeing one pixel of this picture, and God sees the entire picture. God's timing is not our timing. We have the benefit of looking at the Old Testament through the lens of history, but we have to remember as we read these stories, it took place over lifetimes and in some cases generations before the promise of God became clear. Abraham's story is like that. It took generations. It's thousands of years before what God committed to Abraham actually came true, right? Abraham never lived to see his descendants multiply to more than stars in the sky. Yet because God made a commitment to him, it came true and is still continuing to come true today. Ooh, boy, I'm running way late. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't see the time there. That is one thing I have to get used to living in the U.S. is we don't really have time in the islands. It's just kind of there. You just go about it. Okay, so all right. Here it goes. So God's timing is not our timing. So how does it help us to know that? Well, it gives us hope. Hope to know that God is in control, that no matter the circumstance, he is using it for his glory. That God can take junk and turn it into something of great value. We don't have the benefit of being able to look back at a complete summary of all that God has and will do and will come from it. When we look back and we see God's faithfulness in these stories, we know that God has not and never will change, and that he's still going to be faithful to us in the future, right? It can help us to persevere. Why? Because we know that God is in control. When we know God's plan is so great and all-encompassing, we can go through extended hard times knowing that God is in control. Just like the people in the Old Testament. You think Abraham enjoyed waiting 100 years to have his firstborn child? I bet if you'd asked him and Sarah, they'd have been like, 25, 30, that'd be a good time to have our first child. We can do that, and we get into our 70s and 80s, and then the kids will take care of us and all that. That didn't happen. They didn't have a kid till they were 100 years old, but that was God's plan. If they had had a child in a normal time frame, we wouldn't be reading his story thousands of years later. It's the story of Joseph. I don't have time to go into all of it. So if Joseph had a vision, right, that he would one day rule over his father and his siblings. Did that happen right away? No. He was thrown into a well. He was sold into slavery. He got falsely accused. He was thrown in prison. He was forgotten by his friends. I bet if you would ask Joseph when he was in the well if he wanted to get out, he probably would have said yes, right? But that wasn't God's plan. Had Joseph not went through the things that he went through, not only his entire family would have died of starvation, but an entire area, it would have been like a massive, not genocide, I guess no one's killing, but they would have lost Egypt, they would have lost his family group. Millions of people were saved because of the plan that God had for Joseph's life. Yet when he was in that well, he couldn't see that, right? We have to begin to trust God for the waiting. And I think I just kind of ended at that. So we are to rate with expectation, right? Knowing that God is in control, knowing that he has a plan and a purpose, not only for us, but for the whole world, can give us a peace in knowing that the Master is in control. There's an old song in English that says, "Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand." We see the stories of the Bible characters, and we've given a little bit of our story and some of the things that have happened, right? But there's times where it's going to be hard. It doesn't matter if you're in Papua New Guinea or if you're here in Rogersville. There's going to be times where it's going to be hard. And it can seem like God's not there. It can seem like we're just waiting on him. But we can have peace. We can have hope. We can have joy. We can persevere through that because we know God is there. We know that God is in control. We know that he is over it. He's over it. And I don't know, Pastor, I should ask you if you want me to do this, but I don't know if we want to just have a quick altar time here. I don't know who's here today. You might just be in that waiting period, right? I know there have been more than one time throughout missions, again, you can't tell the whole story of anything in a short setting like this. It takes hours and hours and hours to explain everything, but there have been times where I truly knew that I was in God's purpose and plan, right? I knew that I was supposed to be there, but times were hard. And there's been other times when it's been so hard where I start to question that, right? I am where God wants me at that time, but I don't see him working. I don't see him moving. Can I just give you an encouragement today? If you're in that place, if you're in that waiting period, where you don't understand what's happening around you. You don't see how God's going to use this situation. You don't see how God's going to use this sickness or whatever it may be. Can I encourage you? God's got it. He's got it under control. I wish I could tell you that it's going to get better. I don't know. I don't know your situation. I don't know what God's got planned. It doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't always work like we think it should. But we can have hope and a joy and a peace in knowing that He's in control. So y'all, if you're in one of those places right now, I can't say that when you come up here and I pray with you that it's going to get all better. But I can say that, we're in it together, right? We'll be with you. And I just want to pray for you. So if you guys want to come up and pray, if you're in a time of waiting, if you're in a time of hurting, just come up and we'd love to pray with you.